What if I told you that one of the most powerful media in history fits in the palm of your hands? Coins. Something we use without thinking. Something we carry around every day. Something that feels completely ordinary. But are coins really just money? Or are they something more? Can a coin tell us who was in power, what people believed, or even how entire empires worked? Can something so small really shape how millions of people see the world? And why would historians today still study something so simple, so common, so easy to overlook? Is there something hidden in plain sight? And exactly that is what numismatics does. It looks at coins not just as objects, but as sources, as evidence, and as stories. But what exactly is numismatics? To explore these questions, I spoke with Jehan Hillen, an affiliate member of the Cluster of Excellence Eurasian Transformations, a PhD candidate at the University of Innsbruck, and a historian and numismatist. So, what exactly is numismatics?
Numismatics is the study of coin and coin-like objects or other forms of money. And in the context of the ancient world, which is what I'm studying, it's really interesting that coinage is a medium as well. So first of all, coinage is of course a medium of transaction. You use it to purchase things, you use it to stock wealth and to be able to purchase, but also to be able to afford things. And then simultaneously, it is a medium on which you can send images across a very large network of context, let's say. So what happens if you strike your image on a coin is that the coin will travel basically everywhere, and then it depends whether it's silver, gold, or bronze. Then there are different audiences for each of those. But in any case, coins are struck in massive quantities, and they are widespread. So they go towards the towns, they go towards cities, they even go beyond the borders of the empires or kingdoms in which they were struck. And this fact that coins can travel so far across the world makes them a powerful medium. And especially I myself studied the late Roman and the early Byzantine Empire, and here we see that rulers are very much aware of this fact and are using coins to spread political messages as well. And this happens in various ways, and you can debate the agency of the messages and all of these things, but the fact is that there is no medium anywhere in the ancient world that is as widespread, as quantitatively produced as coinage. And this makes it a very, very interesting topic to study, because it's about how messages can be spread in the ancient world in a way that we only know from the modern world. And this is a very interesting topic of research.
So coins are not just money, they are messages. They travel, they reach people, they connect places. They carry images, ideas, and power. That means every coin is telling a story about who created it, a story about who used it, a story about the world it belonged to. But why should we care today? Why would historians spend years studying coins? What can coins tell us that other sources can't? And what might we be missing if we ignore them?
I think coins give answers to questions that are often asked but are not asked within the context of numismatics. And there are a lot of people studying coins, or there are people studying coins, but the integration of the numismatic material with the ancient sources is sometimes still lacking, although a lot has happened in the last 20, 30 years. But why I think this is important is that coinage gives you an unbroken chain of various things, actually. So if we look at the emperors, you have an unbroken chain of imperial portraits. Every emperor has coins. Not every emperor has statues, or at least not all survive, or mosaics, or any other medium. But of coinage, we have them of every emperor. Even if they only ruled for like a few months or something, they strike coins immediately, which also says a lot about how important this is. Besides that, you have the titulature on the coinage, for example. You have reverse type that change, so that says something about which gods were important or what virtues were emphasized in particular periods. And if you study this over the long term, and that is what coinage allowed, and also being able to do that quantitatively, because coins are surviving in enormous quantities. The coins were likely struck in the hundreds of millions, and there are still millions of coins today. We have an online database for Roman coin hoards, which has already over 7 million entries. And these are all individual specimens. So there's an enormous amount of evidence here that we can do a lot with. And it offers a lot of information that is also there in other sources, but it's a lot more fragmentary. And then, of course, you need to integrate all these sources. So I'm not saying you should only use coins, but using coins as an additional type of evidence in historical research can be extremely rewarding. And this doesn't happen to the degree that it could, I would say.
So coins are everywhere. They survive. They show rulers, ideas, even beliefs. They give us faces, names, messages. But there's something even more fascinating. Coins were not locked away in museums. They were not rare objects. They were part of everyday life. People touched them, used them, carried them in their hands. They saw them again and again, every single day. So what did coins mean to ordinary people? What did people actually see when they looked at a coin? And how much influence could that have had?
Yeah, I think coins are something that we are, although less and less, but that we are very used to in our life. And this is one of the things that actually is quite unchanged since the 7th century BC. So they had coins with images and we have coins with images, and that didn't change that much. And especially if you are in a world in which there are not so many images like our world, then what is depicted on the coins becomes very important, because this is the only image you know, probably. Maybe you see some images in the local temple or in a local church, but in a world where there is a lot less imagery than in the world we live now, coins are a very important medium that spread a certain kind of message, and for many people that's probably the only way they know the emperor. So the emperor for them is the guy that's on the coin. Even in the Bible it's alluded to this when Jesus says, who is that on your coin? And they say, oh, that's Caesar, and they are able to know that, and they are far removed from Rome, but who is on the coin, they know. They can read that maybe, or even if they can't read that, but the image of that person with the laurel wreath and with a certain way he is depicted identifies him as the emperor, and that's the only way that they can identify the emperor. And I think for the modern world, this is of course different now, but still coins say something about the country you're in. So, for example, in my own country, I'm from the Netherlands, we still have the king on the coin, which has been the case for centuries now, and even with the euro, that this hasn't changed. And you can see that we still have a constitutional monarchy, which is quite different from our neighbors in Germany, and they have very different signs on the coin. So I think what you depict on a medium that is so widespread and so something that is used every day, so it's really an everyday image that you would see, is that says something about the society that you study. And this is important as much in the ancient world as it is now. Only in the ancient world we lack all the other sources, and then the coins become way more relevant because you can only use coins to reconstruct certain things, and where now we have all sorts of other sources as well.
So coins show us power, society, identity. They reflect how a world sees itself. But how do historians actually study them? Is it just looking at images, or is there more behind it? Can you really reconstruct history from small pieces of metal? What kind of tools do researchers use? And how do you turn thousands or even millions of coins into knowledge?
Words, it's completely different than if you study types and if you study metal. You know, like there are also very chemical studies. So you study the metal components of coinage or something like that. This is completely different from what I do. There are also hard science studies in a sense. You know, there are metallurgical studies, there are meteorological studies that really look into into the metal purity rates and things like that. You can study weight standards, how they evolve. You can study, I mean, maybe a fun example is dye studies, which is something that is incredibly difficult, where what you try to do with dye studies is we have coins of a certain type. So let's say the emperor with a diadem. And then what a dye study does is, a dye is the metal utensil that is used to strike a coin. So you have a coin that is struck with a die. Now what dye studies tries to do is take all the coins of one type and attribute them to different dyes, so to these metal utensils. And if you're able to do that, and maybe you say, okay, I have this coin type and I attribute it to 5 dyes. So 5 different dyes were used to strike this coin type. If we then assume that 10 to 40,000 coins are struck per die on average, we can calculate the amount of coins that were struck of this particular type. And that, if you could do that successfully, would be incredibly successful in reconstructing not what we have now, but what the world once, which is way, way bigger, of course, because we maybe have 1 or 2% of the surviving coinage. or 1 or 2% of the coin that survives to this day. So this is what dice studies does, but this is incredibly difficult for many reasons. First of all, it's way too time consuming. You need all the types, which is they are spread across the world, and new types are being found all the time, which is also problematic. And there are many mistakes. But the interesting thing is that AI might be the one that changes this. And I don't think it has happened yet, but I believe that it might happen someday. If AI can do dice studies successfully based on high quality images, then that may completely change how we quantify numismatics.
So studying coins is not just history, it's science, it's data, it's even technology. It's about patterns, about numbers, about tiny details that reveal big structures. And sometimes it's about asking completely new questions. But in the end, what makes coins so powerful? Why do they matter so much compared to other sources? And what is it that makes them truly unique?
I have my own way of looking at coins, but there are actually multiple ways in which coins are important. So we've already talked about this imperial representation, so maybe shortly rephrase that. So for me it's really a mass medium, so you can send messages on coins to an enormously large amount of people, and you can also even target these messages specifically. So you can say, on gold, I send messages specifically to the elites, because gold will probably be used by the elites and not by the more poorer people in the urban dwellings. And then you can send divergent messages on these various coins and send them to places. And we know this happening at least from the Roman world. For example, there is a sestertius, a bronze coin, a large bronze coin type that depicts the Colosseum that we still know, the Flavian Amphitheater in Rome, and it circulates almost only in Rome, which is logical because it is in Rome, and for people outside of Rome it doesn't really mean anything. So this is a very targeted message that is only sent to the plebs Romana because, well, they know the amphitheater, and they are, and then by sending this message on the coins, they will be informed like, oh, I built this for you. Because, of course, who is on the other side? The emperor. And that's the one who built the amphitheater. So this is, in a way, it's a medium. You could say it's a medium of propaganda, although there's debate about that term. But this is one way of looking at it. Another way, of course, is economics. And there's a huge potential to study economics by using coins. So you could look at metal purity. You could look at how healthy the coinage system is in terms of how large are the coins, how heavy, again, metal purity, but also how many different denominations do we have. So are there only 2 types of coins, or are there 20, and then that says something about how complicated the monetary system is. So economic history is also very important there. And I think these are two different things, but you should never study only one. Because one of the issues you might encounter is if you study imperial imagery like I do, and then really focus on coins as, oh, this is a medium that is spreading this message and it's very important, and I think it's all about propaganda and things like that. But then simultaneously it's still money, and this is the first function, and you should never forget that even how important these messages can also be, and I really believe that the first function of any coin is that it's money, and it has to be used as money. And therefore, and this is sometimes called a conservative medium, changes in numismatic, there are changes. There are definitely changes, but they are never so radical, and they're definitely not like the media today, that you can issue something new every day. This doesn't happen. If you study coin types over a longer time, the first thing you notice is that there's a lot of the same types. There's a lot of standardization, and this has to do with trust. Because the most important thing is that people trust in their coins. And the way to do that is not to change them all the time, but to make a coin that is easily recognizable, that everyone knows this is this type of coin, this is the more or less standard iconography with maybe small changes and small shifts in meaning. So you could say, okay, the emperor has a laureate red in the 1st century and he has a diadem in the 4th century, but it's still a profile bust with an emperor with a legend around it. So it's very similar, you could still see that. And then we are already talking about 4 centuries apart. So this is one of the things. And therefore, changes are not happening that much because you have to keep the trust, you have to keep the monetary economy stable, which you do in that way. But then when something changes, that also tells you that it's likely important, because the risk of changing something is quite big. You can, bad money drives out the good. So, like the economic consequences of making a huge mistake, they are large, and we have examples of that happening. And therefore it means that if things change radically on coins, there has to be some kind of imperial ideological change before it that allowed this change. And this is the breaks that I also study.
So next time you hold a coin, maybe you will see it differently, not just as money, but as a message created with intention, a message designed to travel, a message meant to be seen, a message that moved across cities, across empires, across centuries, and maybe even a message that still speaks today. So the question is, what stories are we still missing? And what might we discover if we start looking a little closer? Thank you for watching. If you want to explore more about how stories shape Eurasia, subscribe to the channel and join us on the next episode of Eurasian Transformations.